It's time for our class to begin. If you turn your Bibles, please, we're going to be starting on chapter 19, but I need to make some corrections on our question dealing with the Eagles. Not the Philadelphia Eagles, but the Eagles in our Bibles. I never had a question that said identify the second eagle, and in my comments last week, I was in error to think that there weren't two distinct nations that were represented by the eagle. I got the first eagle right, where that was indeed Babylon. But I always say, well, it's the same eagle because all the vine is always turning to the eagle, and I took it a different direction than really the context should have led me. So I want to correct that. When we talk about this, why was the second eagle approached? Well, they're going to find protection. Well, that second eagle is Pharaoh. It's Egypt. And I should know that because he speaks about the fact, will he prosper in verse 9. And it takes us back to Zedekiah when he revolted against the Nebuchadnezzar. He sought help, not from God. He sought help from another nation. And that is, and the Bible says it's another eagle. It's not the same eagle, it's another eagle. The characterizations of them are different. The first eagle had diverse colors. It had many wings, but it had long pinions, and shows that it was a more powerful that nation. And Nebuchadnezzar and the Chaldeans were more powerful at this time than the great eagle. They had a lot of feathers. But the colors, diverse colors, the idea of great grandeur than maybe the Egypt had at this time. And you go back to 2 Kings, you'll see that we talked about the oath at 2 Chronicles 36:13 that Zedekiah disobeyed. It was an oath before God. He promised before the Chaldeans he wouldn't revolt against them. He does that. So he turns to that eagle and show how this works in the process. In verse 9 it says, say thus the Lord, shall it prosper? And so when you go to verse 15, when Zedekiah rebelled against him, sending his ambassadors where? The second eagle, the great, into Egypt, that they may give them horses and much people. Shall he prosper? That should have been easy to get, and I missed that. So I want to correct that and help us to realize that there were two distinct eagles, Babylon, and then the vine is God's people turning to Egypt, and that's what he was condemning. So if that makes it clearer, I hated to cloud it up with my error, so I apologize for that. And we go now into our question number 8. When we come to chapter 19, who are the two lions? And you say, well, I'm not going to listen to you. You didn't get the two eagles right. Why should I talk about the two lions? I got this right, okay? I think I do. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. But notice there is a mother, and she is a lioness, and she has these two cubs. And we're trying to identify them. How did you identify them? Did you put some names with these two cubs?
Put down Jehoahaz and Jehoiakim.
Okay. As Zedekiah not included? And you're right about the two that come in order. My difference will be Jehoahaz and Zedekiah, and here's why. There's a lamentation for the people. All of this is, in the latter part, verses 10 through 14, it'll be a lamentation. And Joe, you may be right about that, but Jehoiakim was never exiled. Never goes off into another, never captured and taken off into another country. He was just taken out of his position. But Zedekiah and Jehoahaz, they both were exiled. And where one went into where? Where did Jehoahaz go? He was exiled, went to Egypt. And now Zedekiah is going to what? Exiled where? Babylon. And I think that's what we're seeing, because there's the idea of capturing him in a cage and taking him off to someplace else. And what I can see from Jehoiakim, he just died and he was just taken from his powers. And I don't see about him being exiled anywhere. And therefore, there may be the idea of going off into captivity. And we'll see how there are two different ones. They're showing taking into captivity, but different methods. And so let's just look at the allegory. A lioness, she couched among lions in the midst of the young lions. She nourished her whelps. And she brought up one of her whelps. He became a young lion. He learned to catch the prey. He devoured man. The nations also heard of him when he was taken into their pit, and they brought him with hooks into the land of Egypt. So he falls into a pit like a lion would, and is taken off into the captivity that would take place. So here's the time when Pharaoh Negro and the Pharaohs, they come and take him out of power. That's Jehoiakim, but they take Jehoahaz and they capture him. And say, when she saw that she had waited and her hope was lost, then she took another of her whelps. So here's the second lion cub, and made him a young lion. And he went up and down among the lions. He became a young lion, and he learned to catch the prey. He devoured men. And he knew their palaces and laid waste their cities. And the land was desolate, and the fullness thereof, because of the noise of the roaring. Then the nations set against him on every side from the provinces, and they spread their net over him. He was taken in their pit, and they put him in a what? Put him in a large cage with hooks, and they brought him to the king of Babylon. They brought him into strongholds, and the voice should no more be heard upon the mountains of Israel. And that would happen to Zedekiah. I don't know, I have this horrible memory of the wars over near Babylon and the Euphrates River, where they put people in cages and burned them to death. They still put people in cages in that part of the world. And it was the idea of looking at them, and they're demeaning. They're in cages like animals. But here's the idea of how they would transport them, or how they would capture them. They were young lions. They learned how to catch their prey. And what we see in Israel, especially in their latter days, they were worthy of condemnation because they were shedding innocent blood, these kings were. And God's going to punish them for that as well. So to me, those are the two. And Jehoiakim is different from those. Zedekiah was the uncle to Jehoahaz. And he was indeed of that lineage. Notice the emphasis in chapter 19 is on the princes. It's on the rulers in these first 9 verses. And it's the mother. Here's the lineage of the Davidic line. They were of the David's lineage. They were honored as far as God is concerned. That's the lineage of David. And of course, we know Jesus would come from that lineage. So it's a lamentation for the princes of Israel. Lamentation for both of those kings that were conquered, and they were captured and sent into Egyptian captivity and Babylonian captivity. And that was when Jerusalem was destroyed. Jehoiakim's in the middle of those. He comes in sequence of time where he is, we recognize he's being. So if they just came in chronological order, we'd have those two and forget Zedekiah. Lamentation, theirs was the one that Ezekiel was looking at too, and I think God is, that this will be when Judah is finally destroyed. So in verse 10, thy mother was like a vine. We saw back in chapter 17 where a vine of lesser stature than the cedar trees of Lebanon. You can't do much with it. You can't make a hook out of the vine. And the lesser vine, well, she's of the vine in thy blood, the American Standard says, of the likeness of the same lineage. And it's just not that we're just individual people, but they were the same lineage, the Davidic line of kings connected with David. And they were brought forth fruitful branches by reason of many waters, and it has strong rinds for the scepters of them that bear rule. There's Judah. That's a scepter. And their stature was exalted among the thick boughs, and they were sent in the height with the multitude of their branches. But it was plucked up in a fury. It was cast down to the ground. We've seen plucked up with the eagles. that thing's back in the 17th chapter. But it was cast down to the ground, and the wind dried up its fruit. Its strong rods were broken off and withered. The fire consumed them. That's Zedekiah's time. And now it is planted in the wilderness in a dry and thirsty land, as their land is left desolate. The fire has gone out of the rods of its branches. The idea of the rods make strong rods from the branches, ruling scepter, idea of ruling. It has devoured its fruit, and there is in it no strong rod to the scepter to rule. He didn't have one left. And he said, this is a lamentation, and it shall be for lamentation. That's sad. The Davidic line of God, how far as God's point of where it would be fulfilled in Christ. These were those who were captured and put in a cage, found in a pit, taken off into exile. And I think that's the emphasis upon Jehoahaz and Zedekiah. Structured Jerusalem, fire comes in and burns them. And that's why I would leave Jehoiakim out of that. But that's just my thoughts, and you know how fallible I am. So that's any thoughts that's the reasoning behind it. Any thoughts that you have of how we identify them and how they would fit into this allegory?
Actually said Jehoiachin for the second king. In 2 Kings 24:15, it mentioned he was taken away to Babylon. So
I'm sorry, but Zedekiah would be too. And I would put Jehoiachin in there since he was taken away. But Zedekiah was going to go there too. So Jehoahaz and Jehoiachin, then Zedekiah is placed there. So I stand corrected again. So I have Jehoiachin down here, by the way, but my mind's somewhere else with Zedekiah. All right, any thoughts? You want to add another king? It may work. But Jehoiachin is very much. 2 Kings 24, 2 Kings 23 is Jehoahaz, and so I take Jehoiakim out of it. I'm going to get to Zedekiah as we go through this, and I said that's wrong. Zedekiah would be the one of Jehoiachin's uncle. He'd be brother to Jehoahaz, and he would come upon the scene later, and he would go into captivity. But I think that these are the two that fall into there that were exiled, and leave out Zedekiah right now. He comes later. Thank you. Any other thoughts? All right, question number 9. Why is the parable of the vine a lamentation? We have a book called Lamentations. That was the destruction of Jerusalem in Zedekiah's day, in Zedekiah's rule. And the fire would come and destroy the city under his rule. So why is it a lamentation? And just add to what we've already talked about. The rulers are being conquered. They were the princes. They were of the tribe of Judah. That's the Lion of Judah. They were of such exalted pedigree, and they were made to look just like animals and defeated. And that is the thing. And of course, why is it a lamentation? Because the city's going to be burned with fire, isn't it? The fire has gone out of the rods of its branches. It's destroyed the kings, and now you look at a lesser state of God's people. They will be conquered and destroyed as well. That's the lamentation. And all of a sudden, so why is these lamentations put here? Because they form the first part of probably Ezekiel's scroll. Remember in chapter 2 and verse 10, he ate the scroll and it was bitter to taste. This is the lamentation. This is the bitter taste of what happens to God's kings set in place of Judah. And it happens to its people who are the vine, lesser stature, and burned with fire, and the tribe of Judah is not going to be ruling as king anymore. Anything you want to add to that? And some say, well, this is why it's put here. And now we come to chapter 20 where he's going to date them. We've seen this first section here, and now he makes a new beginning and has a date with that. It's be 591 BC. when he said, it came to pass in the 7th year, in the 5th month, in the 10th day of the month, certain of the elders of Israel came to inquire of Jehovah and sat before me. Well, we've seen that before in chapter 14. That's kind of part of this scroll that may have been there. Now we have a new section that we're looking at through the remainder of these chapters that we're looking at in this 5th lesson. And so, with those thoughts in mind, anybody want to add about lamentation? Was that covered sufficiently for you? Hope so. Question number 10, chapter 20. Why is God not pleased with the elders that are coming to inquire of him through the prophet Ezekiel? So let's just lay down the fact when we saw this in chapter 14, they came, and he did not want to be inquired about because they had idols in their hearts. They were worshiping idols, and their heart was taken by them. And he condemns them for that. That's not the same condemnation here, though it's part of the problem. We'll see here what the problem is. And when you look, this is a long chapter, but you begin to see why did he not want them to come and inquire of him? What's the problem here? That's right, and he takes someone. Chapter 20 is a history lesson of God's people. And what's different about Ezekiel 20 than other cases, he takes us in to show the character, God looked upon his character, how he dealt with people who were worshiping idols, even in Egypt, that God had to deal with these same people, Israelites, that Ezekiel's having to deal with the people of God in his day. So you got that history lesson need to be learned, but he takes them on a history lesson of all of these things that are being set forth, and it's emphasizing his character, his holy character, that was involved in how he dealt with them. That was being honored. It's not looking at, well, you've done wrong, and I'm going to bring fire and destroy your city. That's going to happen. But he wants them to see the glory of his own character and how it was abused, and how when he came in judgment upon them, it was for not, I want them to, he wants a remnant to be saved, but he wants his name to be honored. And that's what we see going through this section. And so he did not want them to come, because when he says that, I don't want to be inquired of you, I want to teach you something. So that's another part we didn't talk about. He interrupts them and says, well, I know you want to come hear about me. The sins are evident, chapter 14 and chapter 20. But he wants them to be given information they need to hear. See if that's not the case here. Son of man, speak to the elders in verse 3, and say of them, thus saith the Lord, Jehovah, is it to inquire of me that ye are come? As I live, saith the Lord Jehovah, I will not be inquired by you. Then he said, this is what you need to hear. Wilt thou judge them, son of man? Wilt thou judge them? Cause them to know the admonitions of their fathers, abominations of their fathers. And say to them, thus saith the Lord Jehovah. I'm going to preach to you now. You want to come and find out something from me? I'm going to give you information that you need to hear, and it won't be about what you're inquiring about. In the day when I chose Israel and sware unto the seed of the house of Jacob, made myself known unto them, the land of Egypt, when I swear unto them, saying, I am Jehovah your God, in that day I swear unto them. What did he swear to them about? He just keeps, I swore by my name, my honorable name, which I can't lie. What did I swear? I'm going to give you a good land, flowing with milk and honey. I searched it out, flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory of all lands. I said unto them, cast ye away every man the abomination of his eyes, and defile not yourself with idols of Egypt. Why? I am Jehovah your God. But they rebelled against me, and would not hearken unto me. And they did not every man cast away their abominations of their eyes, neither did he forsake the idols of Egypt. And then I said, I would pour out my wrath upon them to accomplish my anger against them in the midst of the land of Egypt. Now here's the character part. But I wrought for my name's sake, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the nations, among which they were, and whose sight I have made myself known unto them, in bringing them forth out of the land of Egypt. Now there's your doorway into the similar things that we see. They had, chapter 14, they had idols in their heart. Idols is that opening there, but now how God dealt with them. He should have destroyed them. And what do you think? There was a time when Moses has to intercede. Look at these first 9 verses. He had to intercede that indeed he don't destroy the people. God said, I want to destroy them. I'll make of you a people now. I want to destroy them. What did Moses do? That's why I think this is going back when they worshipped idols. They had the false gods that brought them out of Egypt, the golden calf. And God was angry and was ready to destroy them. They had every right to destroy them because of their abomination. But what happened? David? That's right. And how will you look among the nations? You brought them out here to die? That doesn't look good on you, God. I'm paraphrasing. That's not good. And because of his name and how he wanted to be viewed in the nations, he brought them out of the land of Egypt. And he did not destroy them. And what do you see in every section here after there is indeed the history lesson that we're needed to learn? And we'll hit number 11 now. Why is the history lesson in chapter 20 appropriate for Israel in Ezekiel's day? Remember, he was taking the Spirit to go to Jerusalem and look inside and see all the ungodliness done in the temple of God. They were still worshiping their idols. They had their false gods. And he says, this is not new. But what's important, he said, I wrought for my name's sake that it should not be profane in the sight of the nations. And he's going to show that here's a God that indeed doesn't allow for idolatry. But at the same time, Moses' plea there, I think, is really significant. That may be the background of this history part. That when they just first came out of Egypt, that indeed there was that sense of, well, I should destroy you right now, but for his name's sake, that would be important. So I caused them to go forth out of the land of Egypt, and I brought them into the wilderness. I gave them my statutes. I showed them my ordinances. When did that happen? In Exodus 20. But we got to come to the golden calf and sort of. We're not necessarily chronological from Exodus, but he gave them a law. Moreover, I gave them my Sabbaths. That's what he adds to it now. And this is a wonderful chapter. When we talk about Sabbath keeping today, do you know people that keep the Sabbath day holy? Sabbatarians, Seventh-day Adventists, so forth, and as if that was a law given to all men. He made the Sabbath day holy in Genesis 1. And what is that exalting? Why is it in Genesis 1? On the seventh day he rested. What was that all about? Rested from what? He's our creator. He's our creator. I'm also your God that brought you out of Egypt, but I'm also your creator, and you don't have any respect for that. And it's just not the idea of each seventh day, the Sabbath day, that's part of it, but the Bible speaks about the Sabbath, the year, letting the land every 7 years, letting all the people that owed you any money the 7th year, the years of Jubilee, all the Sabbaths of the land, indeed, that God had commanded. You did not respect me as your creator. And I think that's the significance of the Sabbath, because he's going to be adding that to it, that indeed there's your relationship with me. That was given only to the Jews. And it was given to them, keep the Sabbath day holy. That's the 10 Commandments. That wasn't given to the whole world. And it did not start in the beginning of creation. It was just set aside as holy And God codified it with his own people for them. And they're the ones that are not upholding that. They're not honoring their God even as their creator and worshiping their idols. So I think there's a significance about this, that to be a sign between me and them. Who's me? God. Who's them? All mankind. No. His people, the Jews. His people, the Jews. To be a sign. What was circumcision a sign of? Of the righteousness that Abraham had, and first connected with his people, so the Jews would be circumcised, the boys, on the 8th day, that they might know I am Jehovah that sanctified them. I set you apart. I set you apart by the Sabbath day law too. That's not given to all men. But the house of Israel rebelled against, that's who he's talking to, the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They walked not in my statutes. They rejected my ordinances, which if a man keep them, they shall live. And my Sabbaths they greatly profaned. Then I said, I would pour out my wrath upon them. I do that in verse 14. I wrought for my name's sake, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the nations, and whose side I brought them out. Moreover, I swear unto them in the wilderness that I would not bring them into the land which I give them flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory of the lands, because they rejected mine ordinances, walked not in my statutes, profaned my Sabbaths, for their heart went after their idols. So idolatry was there, but he's exalting his character. He's exalting his very being holy in nature, creator and creating all things. That's connected with the Sabbath day. He adds that to how they profaned his name. And that's what we're getting. So I think that's the lesson. That's why he's going on this history lesson with them, reminding them, but he's reminding them about how they rejected and dishonored his character, the essence of who he is. And I think it becomes very instructive. Any comments or you want to add to that? All right. In chapter 20, after God's judgment on Israel, what four things would occur? And you have to read the whole chapter, and you have to nail here's the four I'm getting at. We can discuss them. Number one, we've seen that the name of God be not profaned in the sight of the nations. We've already seen that. We've seen, I'll make myself known. We've already been seeing that phrase all through here. But we've seen it already. Judgment, you'll be made known. I'll make myself known. But he also adds to it, as he does in this chapter, when I bring you back out of captivity, I will make myself known. I am Jehovah. Jehovah, that is severe. And there's the goodness that brings it back. I did not make a full end of you. That's what we get. Verse 17, nevertheless mine eye spared them and destroyed them not, neither did I make a full end of them in the wilderness. We've seen that. I didn't make a full end of them at all. And so I'll make myself known, and then you shall know that I am Jehovah. Look at verse 38. When he says, I will bring them forth out of the land where they sojourn, but they shall not enter into the land, and you shall know that I am Jehovah. And he said, for as you, O house of Israel, thus saith the Lord Jehovah, go ye serve every one his idols. Again, that's the point that's been made. But my holy name shall be no more profaned with your gifts and with your idols. 42, verse 42, ye shall know that I am Jehovah when I shall bring you into the land of Israel, into the country which I swear to give unto your fathers. You shall know that I am Jehovah. I'll make myself known in judgment, but you shall also know that I am Jehovah, not only by my judgments, but as we get to the latter part of this chapter, we see it taking place that way. So in verse 44, you shall know that I am Jehovah when I've dealt with you for my name's sake. It's about my name's sake. It's about my character. That you have an honor because you're serving idols. I mean, not according to your evil ways, nor according to your corrupt doings, O house of Israel, thus saith the Lord. And so he speaks about that. So when we could pick up a lot of things in the middle of these, but those are the keys, things that I want us to see, and then we'll talk about things of the south. Anything you added to that? That every time he brings this judgment, every time here's this little section, worshiping the Baal or worshiping the golden calf, or what all they did as they went into the wilderness, did not go into the land as God had promised them because of their disobedience. He would bring forth ideas, and my name's not going to be profaned. You will know that I am Jehovah, and I will make myself known as that, and I didn't make a full end of you, which you deserved. And Moses appeals to him, how you look for the nations. He brings all that together, and he says, you're lucky to be here. You got a holy God, and you need to turn from your idols. And that's what the days of Ezekiel, that's why they've gone into captivity, one of the reasons. That's why they dishonor God. Because what happens when you start having idols in your heart? Who's going to be left out being obeyed? And that's the problem with idol. Covetousness is idolatry in Colossians 3:8. Why is that? Because money becomes your God, and that's what's going to determine what you're going to do, not God. Who said, well, use your money to help others, and don't be greedy and all those things. The love of money is all the root of evil. Your love is wrong, but we're not going to follow that. I love you, God, on Sunday, but I'll live like I want to. It is a contradiction, and you'll soon go the way of the world. And they had no right to put another God before them. I created you. There's the Sabbath angle that I think he's hitting at, that he adds to it as he goes through this condemnation that he's bringing to them. Any thoughts along those lines? I think that's why he's angry with them as well. They have polluted themselves, their idols, and yet they want to inquire. Look at verse 31. And when you offer your gifts, when you make your sons to pass through the fire, that's another element of how, when you go into idolatry, it gets gross, doesn't it? You will make that's Molech. Your children, offer your children on the fires of a false god. When you do that, you pollute yourself with all your idols unto this day, and shall I be inquired of you? There's his anger. There's his anger. But you had to wait till you put the whole thing together, and then he hits it, doesn't he? Ought to wait all these 30 verses to find the answer. And I'll be inquired of you, a house of Israel, as I live, saith the Lord Jehovah. I will not be inquired of you. I'm going to give you a history lesson. Son of man, Ezekiel, tell him. And that which cometh into your mind shall not be at all in that you say. Just because I inquired of me, this is what God says. You left me behind a long time ago. We will be as the nations, as the families of the countries, to serve wood and stone. That's what's in your heart. Being like the nations. That's why he's angry. They had idols in their heart in chapter 14. I will not be inquired of you. You're going to hear a history lesson, and you're going to see how you profaned me. And by the way, I am your creator, and I am Jehovah, the God who made a people out of you, and I have spared you when you deserve to be annihilated. That's God. And to me, it's an instructive chapter on the Sabbath law. Was it given to all mankind from the beginning of creation that we worship the Sabbath day? And what is one thing that's not brought into the New Testament? In fact, in Colossians, the Sabbath day keeping, when they judge you the Sabbath day, they don't do that anymore because we're under a new covenant. Still wrong to kill, wrong to commit adultery. But that Sabbath was never brought over into the New Testament. Why? It was only given to the Jews to signify him as their creator, and he wanted them to keep it holy. And what's happening here? God's people in the days of Jehoiaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, Zedekiah, they're not doing that. Okay. In chapter 20, verses 45 to chapter 21, 32, who is the South? Well, those are the Confederates. Yeah. Where would the enemy be coming from? We've got Babylon. We see prophecies about the Babylon. They'll be coming from the north, and where are they going to come? Yeah, and I think there's your South. Notice what he says, Son of Man, verse 45, face toward the south. Why would he be facing toward the southwest? Where is he? He's up there in Babylon. Get your face toward the south. And prophesy against the forest of the field of the south. Okay. And say to the forest of the south, all right, hear the word of Jehovah. Thus saith the Lord Jehovah, behold, I will kindle a fire in thee, and it shall devour every green tree in thee, and every dry tree. The flaming flame shall not be quenched, and all faces from the south to the north, south part of be Jerusalem and Judea, and other parts of the lesser cities, and all flesh shall see that I, Jehovah, kindled it, and it shall not be quenched. Then I said, Oh, Lord Jehovah, they say unto me, is he not a speaker of parables, which we'll come back to? We continue. And the word of Jehovah came to me, saying, Son of man, set thy face toward, what city? Jerusalem. And drop thy word toward the sanctuaries, and prophesy against the land of Israel. And say to the land of Israel, Thus said Jehovah, I am against thee. I will draw forth my sword out of its sheath, and I will cut off from thy righteous and the wicked. And see, he now goes into the sword song. He has a sword song. But the south is Jerusalem, Judea. And he's going to bring the fire upon them. Of course, that would come in Zedekiah's day as well. And therefore, there's the point that he's making there, that, and all through this chapter 21, even through 32, he's setting his face toward them, and now he's speaking to them there, and that becomes important. Question number, well, we don't have much time, but let's talk about the sword in the time that we do have. And ask the question, what description of the sword make it fearful? It's sharp. It's shining like lightning. I mean, well, it could come swiftly, but it's shining like lightning. It's fearful because it is sharpened. It is, my Bible said furbished. It is taken out of its sheath. It's ready to be used. That's fearful. You know, you run around with your little sword in your scabbard and be okay. But when you got it out and it's glistening like lightning and it's pointed at very sharp, that's a fearful thing. And we've already seen that Babylon would come in and destroy Jerusalem, and they would go through those walls, and the sword would come upon them. Not only the famines that taken place, but it was a fearful thing with a sword. And I think that's he emphasizes that as he starts out with verse 8, said, and this is why it's a song, it's in rhythm, and we don't see that in our text, but a sword, it is sharpened and also furbished. It is sharpened that it may make a slaughter. It is furbished that it may be as lightning, and shall we then make mirth? The God of my son, it contemneth every tree, and is given to be furbished that it may be handled. The sword, it is sharpened, yea, it is furbished. It give to the hand of the slayer. So that's how it's going to be used. And we'll pick up on adding to that in the next few verses as well. He comes back to that song of the sword. But it's a fearful thing. And as you know, if you haven't, we play soldiers sometime, and we have little plastic swords. This is the real thing, and that's a frightening thing. Well, that's what's going to happen to Jerusalem. Anything you want to add to that? Something that you want to correct? Okay, thank you.